Hi everyone, in this video we'll take a look at how we can combine the strength of Power BI and Elasticsearch to provide some great data and visualization and do some quick analysis on top of Twitter data. So Power BI itself, if you're unaware, is a great self-service BI solution. It's one of the reasons I always use Power BI is it's free to start using, particularly if you're only looking at the desktop BI tool set. So that's free to download and use. And we are using Elasticsearch as a great search-driven solution. It's a very powerful big data solution that handles a lot of the storage, if you will, of the data from Twitter. So all of the data from Twitter, we are pulling it into Elasticsearch using Logstash, and finally we'll take a look at how we can build some great data and visualization by pulling the data from Elasticsearch into Power BI. So before we proceed, chances are one of the questions you might be asking is, hey, doesn't Elasticsearch, as part of the ELK stack, Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana, provide a great data visualization tool? That's Kibana itself. Yep, absolutely true. But however, in some cases you may want to pull data from Elasticsearch into applications and dashboards outside of Kibana, and this is just a quick example of how we can do that. So in the demo today, we'll take a look at a dashboard, how we can build a dashboard such as this. So right now I'm in Power BI. So the end result of our exercise should be something similar to this dashboard that you're looking at here. So we have some good examples of different styles of visualization where we can view the data, the actual message data itself, and do a quick check as to what are the most popular hashtags, do some other analysis around Twitter. So this entire video will focus on us building a dashboard similar to this from scratch. Now, in terms of the setup itself, in the background I've got Elasticsearch running. So this is a quick example of a Logstash configuration. So as you can see, Logstash is running in the background. It's pulling data using the streaming API from Twitter, and this is an example of the configuration file. So of course I've removed the sensitive keys and tokens here, but once you sign for an application under Twitter, you can put those data in, and the keyword that the Twitter streaming is working against is big data as a search keyword. And as you can see, there's nothing tremendously fancy going on, so we are not filtering any content, and anything that we are getting from the Twitter streaming API, we are pushing it into an index called BD tweets, big data tweets if you will, and that's the server details. So that's pretty much it for the configuration. So now going back to the application itself, Power BI. So just before we dive into Power BI, so just a quick question in terms of how we can extract all this information from Elasticsearch. So we are going to make use of one of the approaches, which is the API. So so for example, let me change this to count. So just to give you an idea, so behind the scene we are calling the search Elasticsearch API. So this is sitting on a different server than my Windows machine, so provided the IP number, and here you can see the actually 62,000 odd tweets which have been indexed within Elastic. So that gives us a quick count, and this is the REST API syntax. Elasticsearch has its own DSL, if you will, with regard to how you can query for data as well as perform updates and delete operations. But in this demo, since we are trying to build a dashboard, just going to focus in on querying the data. So the syntax, if you're not aware, is provide the name of the server. There's the default port if you haven't changed it in the config. This is the name of the index. So you may remember in the config file for Logstash, I was storing all that data inside of PD tweets. and here we are basically doing a quick search for anything that results in query against big data. So we could have changed this. So if I run this query as is, you'll notice the default is it just sends, I think, 10 results, but just so that we start working on it. So if I change this to say AI, for example, you can see that it's searching specifically for content which has AI, like here, for example, artificial intelligence, AI, or say, for example, analytics. So if I search for analytics, you can see that it's actually showing content around analytics. So this is, since it's a REST API, just showing it to you in a browser, but if you do work a lot with REST API, chance you might be familiar with other tools such as Postman here, which is quite handy. It's a Chrome add-in. So for our exercise today, this is an example of the query. So it's again big data. One of the things we would like to sort is against the time in descending order, so that we retrieve the most recent tweets, tweet data. You may remember we had 60,000, north of 62,000, I think, tweets. So we are sorting it based on descending, and the default setting on the server, or the highest you can retrieve based on the default, is 10,000. So you can try this query as is on Elastic and it should work fine, but I've changed the configuration so that I can retrieve a much bigger data set, but let's just use 10,000 for now. So if I click on the send button here, let's give it a few seconds for the data to be retrieved. So Elasticsearch itself is incredibly fast at retrieving the data. It's just the volume of information that we are pulling, which is about 10,000 records, is fairly huge, and it takes a while to send that data. But outside of that, Elasticsearch is incredibly fast if you just wanted to retrieve a subset, maybe top 10, for example, or just a few hundreds. So if you've not got yourself familiarized with the search result, I mean the API itself, I'll just give you a quick insight. So here you can see this is an example of the data structure. So let me collapse this bit here. So you can see that this is how the search query gives us the data, which will become important once we try to pull that into Power BI. So here we have hits, and under hits, hits again. And within that, of course, are all the records pertaining to the search results. So here's a quick example. So this is from the BD tweets again, since here we have anyway filtered for that. And this is against a type called log. So everything that I'm getting log stats to store is stored as a type logs. This is the date timestamp that we are sorting it based off of. The actual message itself, and quite a few other things which we will go through as we jump into Power BI. So this is just an example of one of the search results, so you can see that it's very much repeating. So let's start working with this data set. So I'm going to open Power BI, and we already have a dashboard here, but as discussed, I'm going to start working on a new dashboard which gives us very much similar capabilities for us to start slicing and dicing this data. So let's start off with a fresh book here. So it specifies web, it's a REST API, so that should be alright. Behind the scene now, pretty much Power BI calling and the REST API. And we'll give it a few seconds for it to load that data set. Alright, so that's pretty much there. Alright, so you may remember we had hits. So let's expand hits and go to the list here. Now we'll convert that to a table. That's fine, leave the defaults, and then finally expand the columns. So we've got all the data here, and then finally let's expand the source as well. You may remember from the API we were viewing it through the browser and through this add-in. So that's the main chunk that gives us access to all the data. So here you go, these are the actual tweets itself, details about the account that posted it. This is quite interesting. We'll be looking at this in a bit, which is the client, and various others. So we are probably not interested in a few of these, so we could say, for example, get rid of it. We don't say, for example, if we weren't interested in the source, for example. Oops, let me undo that, remove columns. By mistake I selected an entire group, but maybe you just want to specifically select one or more columns. So for the time being I'm just going to leave it as is. So we'll just do a few bits of data cleansing. So one of the things I'm really interested in is what's referred to as a client. So the general idea being what application did this particular account use to post that tweet into Twitter. So like most people, like you and me, we probably just go to the web page, the Twitter web page, or the mobile application and post it, but there are quite many other Twitter marketing and marketing automation tools out there, so it gives us an insight into who's using what tool. So let's just maybe split it up so that you'll see a pattern here. This is an HTML anchor tag, so we want to extract just the contents of this anchor. So the simplest way is to split by delimiter, so we'll split it on angle brackets, so custom to the leftmost, rightmost should be fine. Oh, I should have changed that, change type, split, change that by leftmost. Okay, so we have got rid of that bit, and now we have to get rid of this angle bracket. So split column by delimiter. We want to do again bracket. Okay. Okay, so basically we've this is what we want. We'll just rename this. Rename. Here we are. Okay, so let's just call this client, and if, we could get rid of all these columns. We don't need remove. We could get rid of all of these unwanted ones, but for now, just we'll keep things as is. And let me just save that. One other thing to keep in mind, and won't be doing a full length video on that, but one of the things we'll notice is that hashtags itself happens to be a list. So if we'll want to create a separate query for that and do a join, but I'll show it to you in the finished dashboard. So let's just close that for now. Again, you'll notice since I've not renamed the columns, it doesn't look very clean, but for a quick demo, hopefully this is quite clear. Alright, so let's actually start doing some analysis. So one of the things we'd like to do is understand who are the accounts that are tweeting the most, for example. So here let's just change that to count, and let's change that to chart view. Let me just undo that effect, and let's just sort that based on descending, sorry, and yeah, change that. So here we can see, again, this is for the time period that I've been indexing tweets from Twitter. So we have the hashtags. The other thing what we needed, as you may remember from this dashboard, was which clients are accessing it the most, number of tweets, finally the actual tweets themselves. So let's see, client. So you may remember we extracted this information, again similar to the previous visualization. Let's just add another column to account, and maybe we'll use the same visualization again. And then finally, let's just add date and timestamp. So here you'll notice that I've added a few additional or custom visualization. So these don't come out of the box with when you install Power BI, but you can download these from the Power BI gallery. So we've got two custom visualizations. So that's the word cloud and timelines filter. Speaking of timeline filter, by default this will be a string. So let's just go back to the query and change this as change type, and let's just make this date time. Yeah, so that's fine. So let's just close that. Okay. Oops. So let's add. Yeah. Let's just drag and drop that down. Let's bring it down, and let's add time series here. And just resize it a bit. Okay. And then finally in the middle, let's add the word cloud there. It's going to take up most of the space here. And where's that message? Yeah, here we are. So let's add message there. Not. Just give me a second. Oh, sorry. Okay, just undo that really quickly. One of the challenges when working with the word tag cloud is that it tends to be really slow. So now you can see that that's the word tag cloud. We'll do some bit of data cleansing. As you can see, it's got the HTTPS URL, the Twitter specific URLs, which is bound to be there in pretty much all the tweets, or vast majority of the tweets. So let's get rid of that. So add in some stop words, and we'll add some custom stop words there. So that's HTTPS and COT. So okay. Again, it tends the word cloud tends to be a bit slow and sluggish. So it's not as responsive as the other visualizations, but hopefully it's still useful and helpful for us to work with. Alright, so let's stop with that. So now you can see that it's really easy for us to do some analysis on that data. So I mentioned that gives us an idea in terms of who's accessing which tools, if you will. So most of us, we would use the Twitter web client, or the Android mobile app, or the iPhone mobile app, for example, but there are other third-party tools. So as an example here, we can see that these are the most active accounts, Twitter accounts. So let's just say, for example, if I wanted to see who's using this tool, this is a free tool, if then that, I think it's so you can basically see how. Similarly, if I wanted to analyze what other tools different accounts use, like say for example, don't know who these accounts are, but as an example, this particular Twitter account tends to tweet quite often against that particular time frame. They use the Android application, or if I wanted to see who's using Round Team, for example, for doing posting content on Twitter, etc. It allows me to do some quick analysis of that data. Finally, there's a bunch of other ways that we can slice and dice this data, but in the interest of time, I've already created another dashboard, which I showed you in the very beginning. So in addition to what I've just done, just added the number of tweets, basically extracting if it's a retweet or not, and I've just moved things around here. So here, instead of the users, I've actually got the hashtags itself. So you may remember the query itself is on big data, so these are, as you would expect, the most relevant other hashtags, if you will, like say for example data science. So if I, these are the other popular hashtags used along with big data. as well as timeline filter. So for example, if I just wanted to look at the tweets for April, you can see that it gives us a very rich, interactive, kind of like an experience. So when I selected April, that's 3,000 tweets, and here you can visually see some of the core activities and what people have been tweeting. So that's just a quick example of how you can use Elasticsearch and use the rich data and the search capabilities within Elasticsearch, but surface that in Power BI and build some quick and easy dashboards. In future videos, we'll take a look at how you can use Elasticsearch from within other analytical tools. Thanks everyone for watching. Cheers.